usually when we begin a new tractate of the Mishnah, we begin with a few pasukim, a few verses from Tanakh that motivate, that underpin the tractate. And one of the fascinating things about Rosh HaShanah, about New Year, is that although this is so important in our kind of our religious calendar today, it's not mentioned in or it is nearly not mentioned in Tanakh. And to the extent that it is mentioned, it's not what we think it is. So we have a verse in Shemot, Vayom Hashem and Moshe vel Aaron. God speaks to Moshe and Aaron, Be'eretz Mitzrayim. This is in the land of Egypt. This is before leaving Egypt. HaChodesh hazeh yeh lachem, HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodashim. This month is going to be the beginning of the month. So this month effectively is Rosh HaShanah. It's Rosh Chodashim. It's the first month of the year. Rishon hu lachem lechodshei Hashanah. It shall be the first month of the year to use. That's the first indication we have in Torah that there's a month which is at the head, Rosh Chodesh, which is Rishon hu lachem lechodshei Hashanah, Rosh Chodashim, the first of the months. But that month is Nisan. That month is in the spring. Hayom atem yotzim b'chodesh aviv. You go out in the springtime. And when we read about this festival that we now describe as Rosh HaShanah, it's actually in the 7th month. Look, in B'midbar, this is from Pinchas, Uvachodesh HaShve'i b'echad l'chodesh mikra kodesh yelachem, in the 7th month, on the first day of the month. That's 1st of Tishri. You'll have a holy convocation. Kol melechet avodah lo tasu, we don't do any work. Yom Teruah Yeh lachem. This day is a day of blowing. So there is a day of blowing, but it's in the 7th month. It's not in the 1st month. The day of blowing is in the 7th month, not in the 1st month. What else do we find? Well, there is a reference to something that feels a little bit like Rosh HaShanah, actually in Nehemiah. Ezra comes back from Babylon to Jerusalem. He finds the whole people in the whole of the Jewish. He finds the Jewish community in the land of Israel in disarray, and he needs to do something about it. And one of the things he does is to read from the Torah. And in chapter 8 of Nehemiah, we hear that Ezra assembles all of the people, or the entire people assemble. And but before the Watergate, we've heard about the Watergate in the context of Yoma. Vayomru leEzra hasofer lehavi et sefer Torah Moshe, and they ask Ezra the scribe to bring the scroll of the Torah of Moshe. And then in Nehemiah we read, Vayavi Ezra HaKohen et HaTorah lifnei HaKahal me'ish ve'ad isha v'chol mevin lishmoa b'yom echad lachodesh hashvi'i. It's on the first day of the 7th month that Ezra the priest brings the Torah before the congregation. For men and for women, it's very interesting. It's a description of this is the first example of public Torah reading that we have in Tanakh. It's the core of our public Torah reading today. It's for everybody. It's for men and for women. Ezra uses the most modern possible technology. He uses a sefer, a scroll, rather than the clay tablets, which people have been using until then. So he uses the most modern technology. He assembles everybody. He reads in the town square. And this is on the first day of the 7th month. In other words, on the day that we now think of as Rosh HaShanah. So these are the references to Rosh HaShanah in Tanakh. And they don't use the word Rosh HaShanah. But when we get into the Mishnah, we find the word Rosh HaShanah. And the Mishnah begins, again, not as we expected. We're expecting to hear about New Year on the first day of the 7th month. The Mishnah begins, Arba'a Rashi Shanim Hem. Actually, there are 4 new years. And the Mishnah is now going to give us a list of the 4 new years. And remember, of course, that the month counting starts in Nisan. And that's where the Mishnah begins. Echad b'Nisan Rosh HaShanah l'Melachim v'Laraglim. The first of Nisan, that's the first new year. That's for kings and for festivals. So if you look through the Book of Kings, you'll see that, the Book of Kings is really a chronology of the history of Israel from Shlomo right through to the destruction by the Babylonians, and it carries a chronology of each king, and it says always, in the first year of his reign, in the second year of his reign, in the third year of his reign, and so on. Well, where do we count? When we count the first, the second, the third years of a king's reign, what do we count them from? They did not actually count them from the day that the king was crowned. They were not counted from coronation day. They were either counted from Nisan or from Tishri. And there are biblical scholars, by the way, who believe that at different points in the history of Judah and Israel, people used both Tishri and Nisan as the starting point. But according to our Mishnah, Nisan is the new year for kings, i.e. kings should start counting in Nisan. And the same for festivals. If you make a vow to bring an offering during one of the festivals, then that will be one of the cycle of festival years starting in Nisan, i.e. starting with Pesach. So Pesach is the first festival. That's the first new year. But Echad Elul Rosh HaShanah l'Maaser Behema. The first of Elul is the new year for Maaser, for tithing cattle. Again, it's like the tax year. We need some kind of cutoff to determine what our offerings are going to be for Maaser. First of Elul for cattle, I guess because the cattle are born in the spring. So by the time we get to the first of Elul, everything has calmed down. And Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Omrim Bechad b'Tishri. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon pushed this a month later to the first of Tishri. Bechad b'Tishri Rosh HaShanah l'Shanim v'la Shmitin v'la Yovelot la Netiyah v'la Yerakot. So the first of Tishri is the new year for years. So that's counted. If you want to count a whole year, for example, we're going to count Shemitah years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or we're going to count Jubilee years, 7 counts of 7. From those are counted from the first of Tishri. And then for planting, La Netiyah, this is for calculation of Orla. When we plant a tree, we don't take fruit from it for the first 4 years. So this is counted from Tishri. Ve'la Yerakot, and for vegetables, this is for offerings for truma from vegetables. And then, so we've gone through from Nisan to Tishri. Everything's quiet over the winter. And then B'echad B'Shvat, on the first of Shvat, Rosh HaShanah La'ilan, the new year for trees. This again means for tree produce, for tithing produce which is either budded, sprouted before or after the first of Shvat. K'divrei Beit Shammai, that's according to Beit Shammai. Beit Hillel Omrim B'chamisha Asar Bo. And Beit Hillel say on the 15th of Shvat, which is the new year for the trees that we celebrate now. So there are 4 new years. And none of these new years, by the way, correspond to the new years that we think about. These are all tax years, effectively, or they're years for counting for kings or for jubilees. These are all administrative years. These are the first 4 years. But in parallel to these 4 years, there are 4 periods when the world is judged. That's how the Mishnah continues. Ba'arba'a parakim ha'olam nidon. So just as there are 4 different places when the new years begin for tax purposes, there are 4 times in the year when the world is judged. B'Pesach ala tuvua, on Pesach for produce. That means for field produce, for grain, effectively. The world's judged for grain at Pesach. And that's why we bring the Omer offering on the altar, because the world's being judged for grain. Ba'atzeret al perot ha'elan, on Shavuot, for the fruits of the tree. This is the time when the trees are sprouting. Rosh HaShanah, this is the first time when Rosh HaShanah is mentioned in the Mishnah. Rosh HaShanah kol ba'ei olam ovrin lefanav kivnei maron. Shenemar hayotzer yachad libam hamevin el kol ma'asehem. On Rosh HaShanah, all the people of the world pass before him, kivnei maron. We don't know what kivnei maron means. And now the Mishnah will bring a verse from Psalms. He who fashions their hearts together, who understands all their deeds. Hayotzer yachad libam hamevin el kol ma'asehem. So this does seem to be about personal judgment in some way. And the Gemara relates kivnei maron to a bit like a flock of sheep passing under the eye of a shepherd. The academics actually say kinumeron. This is a reference to a Greek word which refers to a soldier. So this is a bit like someone like a monarch lining up all his soldiers and inspecting them in serried ranks. And one interpretation suggests that we're judged like individuals, like members of an army, of a massed group. Another interpretation suggests that we're judged like individuals. And we can, maybe there's something of each of that in the ceremony of Rosh HaShanah. And then the Mishnah continues, Uvechag nidonim alamayim. On Sukkot, one is judged for rain. And of course, we've seen pouring the water on the altar on Sukkot, because the world's judged for rain on Sukkot just as much as we bring the grain offering on Pesach. So that is the structure. Those are the 4 times when the world is judged. And that allows us to look at the structure of the Masechet, the whole of the Mishnah of Rosh HaShanah. The first chapter looks at the patterns, the 4 per year, and we're going to get on to announcing the new moon. The second chapter carries on to discuss the new moon and particularly the precedence, the importance of the Bet Din. The third chapter then deals with blowing the shofar. We read in the Psukim that Rosh Hashanah is a Yom Teruah, is a blowing day. And the fourth chapter begins to carries on with the shofar, but begins to transition, if you like, from the temple to the synagogue. So that's the structure of the Masechet. And it begins, as we said, by announcing the new moon. The Mishnah continues. Al shisha chodeshim hashluchim yotzin. So messengers would go out from Jerusalem announcing the new moon. And this is very interesting. We're not dealing with Rosh HaShanah now. We're dealing with the new moon. The first 2 chapters of the tractate are going to deal with the new moon, not the new year. We're dealing with the new moon. Al shisha chodeshin hashluchim yotzin. There are 6 different months when the messengers go out to announce when the new moon was. Why so? Well, we're going to learn when we learn about the Bet Din. The new month only begins when the Bet Din announces that the new moon has been seen. So we need an announcement, and the people need to know about the announcement. So why do the messengers go out? Al Nisan mipnei Pesach. Well, they go out on Nisan because of Pesach. People need to know when Pesach is. Al Av mipnei Hatzanit, on Av because of the fast. They need to know when the 9th of Av is. Al Elul mipnei Rosh Hashanah. Again, we've got the expression Rosh Hashanah now in the Mishnah. They go out in Elul because of Rosh Hashanah, because at the beginning of Elul, we're already counting down to Rosh Hashanah. We need to know when Rosh Hashanah is going to be. Al Tishrei mipnei Takanat HaMoadot. On Tishrei, because of all the festivals that happen in Tishrei, we need to know when Sukkot is and Shemini Atzeret. Al Kislev mipnei Chanukah. the messengers go out on Kislev because of Chanukah, Ve'al Adar mipnei HaPurim, and on Adar because of Purim. Uchshaya Beit HaMikdash Kayam, and when the temple used to stand, Yotzin Af Al Yar mipnei Pesach Katan. And when the temple stood, they used to also go out to report Iyar because of Pesach Katan. In other words, Pesach Sheni. People needed to know when the second Pesach was if they missed the first one. I'm sorry I'm way over time, but it's difficult starting a new Masechet. Let me stop talking now and stop recording, and then we will. I'll take any questions.